Jumping right back into the action here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to stay in the state of New York and talk about now the New York Football Giants. Not the same expectations as there were on the Jets, right? Because of all the excitement around Aaron Rodgers, the talent that they have on their team. Not so much the same thing for the Giants. And I think it all culminated in week one, kind of showing everyone what they already kind of expected, right? What they were already thinking this season was going to go like, because the Giants lost at home to the Minnesota Vikings 28-6, scoring the least amount of points this week. And based off of that fact, not only the scoreline, the stat sheet, and whatever, and how it looks on paper, but just for the fans that were there watching on TV or anything like that, just based on what they saw, wherever they did see it, people are already calling and thinking about benching Daniel Jones. Unrealistic, I think, to kind of defend him here. It's unrealistic to say that it's all him, right? With how team-oriented football is, it's just unrealistic that every little problem that comes up is Daniel Jones, but he makes it very hard for it not to seem that way, especially with some of the decision-making, some of the inaccurate throws, and just the lack of development and growth that we've seen from other quarterbacks that may have struggled in year one or a couple years. But with how Daniel Jones looked in 2022, you felt like that was the breakthrough moment. But he comes back the next year, last year actually, he gets that new contract, he gets injured, doesn't play great, and now we're back to the same old Daniel Jones, it seems. And just on Sunday, a couple days ago, against the Vikings, the stat line, pretty much what you'd expect if you lose 28-6. 22 for 42 in this game, 186 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. If you guys saw any of those interceptions, the one to Harrison Smith in the end zone, just really nothing there. There was a player going into the end zone, but you're just forcing that throw. It can't be so direct and such in a way that it's a line drive, because you basically threw it at Harrison Smith's face. So that was one. And then the other one, obviously the screen backed up against his own end zone. The screen to the right gets picked off by Van Ginkel there. And those are always more, I think, a credit to the defensive lineman, because that's extremely tough for how close he was to Daniel Jones. But when it's not your day, it's not your day, right? And that's what it was. Van Ginkel just picked that thing out of the air and just walked basically into the end zone. And that was pretty much it in that game. As if anybody thought the Giants were going to come back, that pretty much did it. And, the boos started raining down during the game, obviously, and then afterwards. I'm sure you guys saw the clips of Daniel Jones walking out of the stadium, more fans just waiting for him to boo him. And, with all of that being the case, with it being so obvious, as it seems that Daniel might not be the answer, Brian Daboll has reassured that Daniel Jones will continue to be the starter going forward. And that is typically what you see out of coaches, right? You don't want to make such a just sudden decision with especially your starting quarterback. You don't want to be so impulsive, is the word I was looking for, when deciding who your starting quarterback is, right? But it's not like this is the first season. It's not like this is his first year, or he's a rookie or second year player. He's pretty well into his career now. He's already gotten paid, which is great for him, but makes the situation worse because he's not living up to that contract. And now, not only is he getting paid too much in a lot of people's eyes, but he's not, validating that contract. And it just seems like the Giants are basically playing for nothing, for no improvement at that spot. So with that being the case, now I dug up some of these facts that I found about Daniel Jones, some of these stats that have followed him throughout his time here, to kind of show you guys and paint you a picture as to why, to answer the question, why I don't think it's an overreaction to bench Daniel Jones just after week one, because it's been years now that I think we've seen the same thing, and just throwing him out there and expecting him to just be a different quarterback because you think you're going to implement some different scheme or a different game plan for a different opponent, it's just insane. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So to give you guys an overview of what Daniel Jones has been in his time in New York, you look at it, since he's been drafted in 2019, he's had Head coach Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge both fired in their stints. Offensive coordinators Mike Shula and Jason Garrett also fired in their times there with the Giants and with Daniel Jones. 0 for 4 of these, 0 for 4 on coordinators and head coaches. All 4 of these guys are currently out of the NFL and don't have NFL jobs anymore after their time with the Giants. Then you look at it a little bit more recent. Only 4 quarterbacks had a lower completion percentage and yards per attempt than Daniel Jones, and only Bryce Young had a lower passer rating in week 1 than Daniel Jones. And no surprise, the Panthers not so hot of a start either with their new head coach Dave Canales. And to continue on, the stats since signing that $40 million deal for Daniel Jones are as followed. 64% completion percentage, 37th in the NFL since that time. A 65 passer rating, which is also 37th in the NFL. Touchdown percentage is 1% since he signed that $40 million contract, again 37th in the NFL. And to make it all worse, I guess, I got sent this stat, and I've seen it a lot more since I last saw it. Daniel Jones has thrown more pick sixes than touchdowns for the New York Giants since he signed that $40 million deal, 2 touchdowns in his time since that deal, and 3 pick sixes as well. That speaks for itself. I don't really have to analyze it too much more. 1-7 in his last 8 starts with 2 touchdowns, outscored 249 to 81, and since 2022, since that offseason when he got his deal, he's only mustered 1,000 yards and 8 interceptions since receiving that deal. So, you could say that this season is early, but we're going back to 2019, 2022, 2021, and nothing has really changed. And, again, I started this whole thing off by saying that it's unrealistic to just point it all at him, but at some point, if you keep changing things around him, we've seen him get some new offensive linemen, some new receivers, some new offensive coordinators. They brought in Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen. They drafted Malik Neighbors. They got rid of Saquon. And the same thing that has been kept constant throughout all those years has been Daniel Jones, obviously. So if you're seeing the same results, maybe it's time you change from the one consistent piece of this puzzle that you've kept all these years, but have tried to get different results, but just keep getting the same old bad records, bad stats, and everything that follows you. And to that point on Daboll and Joe Schoen, they didn't even draft Daniel Jones, right, back in 2019, and they still gave him that deal, which, just is beyond me as to why they give him that deal over Saquon Barkley, which obviously now I've talked about it multiple times. We've talked about what we saw on Hard Knocks and making that sort of decision between Saquon and Daniel Jones. Obviously, it was a mistake. It's happened already. We can just keep talking about it, but nothing's going to change. But you could at least try to rectify it now and, show everyone that you realize that maybe Daniel Jones is the problem. And that's where some of the frustration you see from the fans coming from, because they've obviously made up their mind as to what the problem is. But when you have your organization just looking at other options or just not looking at the quarterback as the main problem, or at least admitting it, then comes the frustration, then comes the boos, and just the bad aura you have around an organization, which you can kind of validate it, obviously, with all the information I provided. But with this point about benching Daniel Jones so early, yeah, it would be a little bit surprising, but I don't think anybody would come, firing at the defense of Daniel Jones anywhere in the media or anything like that. Yes, it would be surprising, like I said, but, you look at it, you analyze it a little bit more, and I think people would just, nod their head and accept this decision. Also, what's interesting about this season, Brian Daboll is calling the offensive plays this year, with some of the rumors that he could be a casualty of another bad season and potentially get fired. If that could be a possibility, of course you want to be the one calling the plays, dictating how well this team does on offense. But to me, if you keep having Daniel Jones in here making the same mistakes, some bad decisions, some bad reads, it's going to make you look a little bit worse too, and make you look like your offense just isn't working if the quarterback is struggling so much. Of course, there's other factors like the receivers just maybe not getting opened enough. The offensive line has been brought up. But again, the Giants don't have the luxury of having all this time to really delve into those problems anymore because they've been doing it for the last couple of years. And right now they're on the brink of making a lot of changes if this season doesn't go better than it did last year, and they're already off to a bad start. So if Daboll doesn't change something, you don't really know the potential of what Daboll's offense could be if you don't change the quarterback, in my opinion. So that's one thing. And, the expectations anyway, outside of Daniel Jones, outside of who the quarterback is, I don't think anyone's thinking that Drew Lock is going to be anything that much greater, or Tommy DeVito going to be anything that much greater. But if the expectations are low anyway, I don't see why, or I don't see the problem with changing the quarterback now. If the expectations are to finish last, to have a top draft pick anyway, I don't think you lose anything by changing the quarterback now if you're trying to save your job. And Brian Daboll is obviously trying to save his job. Same thing with Joe Schoen. You got to make decisions like this to keep you employed with this organization. And if you're going to get fired anyway, you might as well try different things and try a different quarterback out to see if the results change in the end. You don't want to waste Malik Nabers' first season, the talent on defense that you got this offseason, and with the turnovers from Daniel Jones and things like that, it just puts the defense in very bad situations where they're always on the field, and then in turn they might look worse because everybody thinks that they're just getting scored on every drive, where that, if you look deeper into it, isn't the case. They're just starting in bad field position. They're drawing the short straw every time. So all of this, it is feeling like I'm putting it on Daniel Jones. And again, I will state that it's unrealistic to put it on him. But with him being the quarterback, with how the offseason went with Saquon, it's almost the position that the Giants have been put in by giving him this extension. And now they're forced into this weird, awkward spot where, yeah, all the pressure is on Daniel Jones, and that might not be fair to him because they haven't, brought in other parts of it that could help him out a little bit, but it does come to a point where a lot of it could just fall on Daniel Jones. So we'll see when that time comes that they do bench him. I can't see it extending anywhere longer than 4 weeks or 3 weeks or anything like that if he keeps performing like he has, but that is something we will keep track of as we move on through the season. But moving on now with the show, sticking on the topic of quarterbacks, we're going to talk about the situation in Pittsburgh. Justin Fields got the start this Sunday. Mike Tomlin spoke about the quarterback decision today. We're going to include some of those nuggets in this next segment, but also just talking about whether Justin Fields should continue to be the starter or will Russell Wilson reclaim his spot. That is coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere.